Ebbin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Yesterday, we all left here tired, and we're happy to get out of here, but I know that when you went to bed, you were longing for something else, and that was to learn more about George Washington. And in recent years, we've talked about Washington the Burgess and Washington the candidate, and in learning more about Washington myself over the past year, I wanted to talk a bit about Washington the businessman. Before the Revolution, the colonies operated within the one-sided British mercantilism system, and Virginians were prohibited from exporting goods directly and were forced to sell through British agents, middlemen, who made the real profit from tobacco and other crops. Members of the planting class were falling so deeply into debt that they were selling off their estates. And when his father, Augustine, died, 11-year-old George, along with his mother, Mary Ball Washington, assumed many of the responsibilities of running and managing his family's estate, Ferry Farm, which I believe is in the senator from King George's district. A function of this circumstance is that, unlike many of his peers who received a more classical education, Washington's schooling was extremely limited and centered around mathematics and practical sciences. Our first president developed a street-smart pragmatism that he would apply to business decisions for the rest of his life. Now, when Washington noticed a commercial vacuum in export markets, he moved from cultivating tobacco at Mount Vernon towards wheat and other grains. He sold these foodstuffs lucratively up and down the East Coast and even into the West Indies. He enthusiastically invested his fortune, which would not have been of the size that it could have been invested had he not married into money when he married Martha Custis. This allowed him to take risks in order to diversify his economic base. Commercial fishing on the Potomac was hugely profitable, and by investing in newly designed nets, he caught thousands of pounds of herring every year. Now, while much of Washington's success was attributable to his business acumen, it is important to remember that to a large degree, his prosperity was built on the backs of enslaved people and indentured servants. He also brought skilled laborers, including blacksmiths, weavers, carpenters, to Mount Vernon. And he loved innovation and vigorously applied as many new technology of the day to his operations as possible. He constructed a state-of-the-art gristmill at his estate. He deeply resented the mercantilist system and saw it as holding him and his fellow Virginians back. Washington hated debt, and the British were forcing the American people deeper and deeper into economic submission. He recognized that the colonists would need to take drastic action to secure prosperity and economic independence. After the war, Washington returned to find his cousin, Lund Washington, had severely mismanaged Mount Vernon and, unthinkably to the general, had neglected to take advantage of the lucrative business opportunity of providing food to the Continental Army. And as our first president, Washington took an aggressive approach to leveraging the burgeoning American markets, which he viewed as a strong portfolio of valuable regional assets. He viewed economic diversity as a unifying force, using interstate trade and commerce to bind the young nation together. Meanwhile, Britain's agricultural and industrial revolution were massively successful, and Washington wanted the nation to emulate its former foe. In looking at the state of American agriculture, the economic risk of a one-crop system became apparent. But the British prohibited the sharing of knowledge and manufacturing secrets across the Atlantic. They even forbade engineers, mechanics, and toolmakers from leaving the country. Washington did everything he could to obtain industrial secrets that would lead to mechanized farming and improved crop rotation processes. At home, he engaged in experimental farming methods that included a seed exchange with Thomas Jefferson of Monticello. Now, his diverse income included rent from properties across Western Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. He even invested in housing in the newly established District of Columbia. Imagine that, a president who was also a real estate developer. We can take many lessons from Washington the businessman, diversifying one's portfolio, applying the newest technologies, filling market vacuums, and avoiding debt. Mr. President, as legislators, we should apply these same principles to our work as stewards of the Commonwealth.